Hello, everyone, and happy Mother's Day weekend. On this special weekend, I wanted to take a minute to just sit with you and drink a cup of tea and talk a little bit about being a mother and an author. How do I balance those two? And the answer is I don't know. But in all seriousness, one of the top questions that I tend to get when people discover that not only have I been an author and written books and managed to publish them in the last 4 years, but I also have the pleasure of saying that I am a homeschool mom to two brilliant and wonderful children. Who are currently age 7 and 9. But that means that when we started our publishing journey, which officially would have been like 2019, even though I was writing before then, that was 4 years ago. So one of them was 3 and one of them was 4 going on 5. They're only a year and a half apart. So we're very lucky that they are close enough that we can do a lot of similar things with the two of them. So we enjoy reading a lot. Our homeschool is almost entirely based around books and history, and my biggest goal has been to just instill a love of learning in them because I believe very, very strongly that if we instill a love of learning in our children from a young age, then they will constantly be learning the rest of their life because there's so much to learn. We're never done learning, right? Even I, as an adult, I learn something new every day. It really is a truism. And I enjoy every minute of reading with my kids. Before Mother's Day, I wanted to take a minute to just answer that question that I get most often. How can you be an author and a mother? And the answer is it's a very delicate balance. Not only that, but it's going to be different for every single mom, right? You have to find what works for you. Because what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you. So what really started me on realizing that I could do both, and that's really the starting point, right? Is can I do both? Is it even possible to pursue my own dreams while raising two children? And the answer is yes, 100% yes. The number one book that I would recommend, mostly because it launched me on my own journey, is One Beautiful Dream by Jennifer Fulwiler. Now, I don't currently own my copy or have my copy here with me because I lent it out to somebody who really needed to read this book. I do have her second book, though, Your Blue Flame, which also has been incredibly, incredibly helpful on my writing journey. So this is Jennifer Fulwiler. And if you haven't heard of her, she is incredible. She is so inspirational, and I highly recommend following her on YouTube, on Instagram. And then I think she also has a podcast in addition to that. Basically, she films her podcast for YouTube, but it's available everywhere. So One Beautiful Dream is about her journey from realizing that she had 6 kids and was homeschooling them and wanted to pursue her own things. And it's basically about her, it's a memoir, but it's very funny because she's a comedian. She's a stand-up comedian. And just the way she delivers things, it's so pertinent and such a good reminder, especially in this day and age. Her biggest thing is talking about how we used to raise our kids in a village, right? It takes a village, right? Everybody's heard that. It takes a village to raise a kid. And that's just one kid, so much less 6, right? And basically she realized that she couldn't do it on her own. So, it's one of those, we all, I think as mothers especially, we have to realize it takes more than us, right? It's going to be more than us to raise our kids. That's just how it's going to go. Whether you are a single parent or do have a spouse who's going to come alongside you, or maybe you have a spouse who doesn't come alongside you and it is really left up to you. You still have to build your village and you have to find it out there amongst your friends. You have to build your found family, right? Build your village that you want to help you pursue life and do life together. So in One Beautiful Dream, Jennifer Fulwiler takes a look at how she came to the realization that she needed that village, how hard it was to ask for help, because these days we are told repeatedly over and over again that we can do it ourselves, right? And that we should do it ourselves. That, oh, that's a sign of independence, that you should do it yourself, right? Instead of coming alongside each other and building community. And especially since the pandemic, I think we all have realized that no, we need community, right? We need community, whether that is online through something like YouTube or through social media, but more so in person. There is something very different about meeting with somebody in person. And if I could meet with each one of you and have a cup of tea with you and just talk, I would adore every minute of that. I am an introvert, which doesn't mean that I don't like people. It means that I thrive on one-on-one conversations. And I would love to have a one-on-one conversation with you. So in the meantime, we will keep to YouTube and maybe someday we will meet in person. So I read One Beautiful Dream and realized I needed a village. And also, a huge part of that book is about her realizing that she could pursue her dreams, right? That if mama's happy, everybody's happy. Basically, that's what it comes down to, is if we feel filled up, if we feel like we have accomplished something for the day, right? And it totally depends on what your, what your type is, who is you, right? I am an INFJ. So to all the INFJs out there, that's what I'm dealing with. Part of becoming a mom is discovering who you are as a mom, but then you have to still cling to who you are, right? And that's what this whole book was finding that balance, realizing that it's okay to pursue your dreams at the same time as raising kids. In fact, it's inspirational to them. And that's absolutely what I have found, is that by raising my kids and letting them see us pursuing our dreams, because again, my husband and I are both pursuing full-time publication, right? We are both publishing our books. So what's really fun is seeing our kids react to that and writing their own books, right? They love to sit down and write their own books because they see us doing that. And that means so much to me. Like I said, there was then the second book, right? Your Blue Flame. And this one is about recognizing that you were made to do something only you can do. There is something special out there that only you can do, that you can only bring to the world, right? Because that's how God designed us, is to have a special purpose in the world. And so your blue flame is something that it feels like you were meant to do it, right? Something that feels like it is your destiny to do this, okay? It gives you energy, okay? And it benefits other people. It is something that reaches into other people's lives and gives them a little bit of hope, right? That perfectly describes what writing is to me, okay? I have known since I was a young child that I wanted to be a storyteller. I used to tell stories with all my little stuffed animals, and I would have them act out little stories, right? And then what I most distinctly remember is at age 9, kind of reaching a point where I'm like, okay, I'm too old to do this anymore, but I can write them down. And that's when I started writing books. And that's third grade for me. And that's definitely, when most children start writing books, usually it's, like I remember write your own version of a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, right? Or we read If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Okay, write your own. If you give a what would happen? So it started with all of those, and then I wrote my first book. It's so fun to look at those and see not only how far I've come, but to be reminded that from very early on, I knew I was going to be an author. And it might not be as easy for you. For some people, it's really hard to figure out what are they called to do. And actually, that's why I really recommend picking up this book. She has a whole walkthrough thing where she's like, okay, let's figure out what your blue flame is, right? And she goes through a whole section where she's like, okay, here's a list of things that do not bring me joy, right? That could bring me joy, but they don't. And it's things like, baking and sewing. And she goes through this whole list and she's like, but just because they don't bring me joy doesn't mean somebody's going to read this list and go, oh, but I love baking. I love baking. It brings me so much joy, right? And then she talks about how you can incorporate that into your everyday. So let's say baking is your blue flame, okay? The thing that makes you just so happy. Maybe you're working full-time in an office, right? Maybe you're working for Dunder Mifflin. Well, you can find joy by saying, you know what, every Friday I'm going to bake something really cool, right? Look up something really neat like British baking show. And I'm going to bake something, I'm going to bring it in and share it with my coworkers, right? Because that brings you joy. So again, see how I'm talking about it and getting energized, right? When I talk about my writing, when I even talk about my research, so research is actually part of my blue flame, right? It's actually a very specific thing. I love writing, but I also specifically love writing historical mystery because there is a level of research and coordinated thinking. Like I like the planning part of it, all of that. And that's not true for everybody, right? My husband loves making up his own worlds, right? I mean, we can go into a whole thing about world building historically versus fantasy, right? And that's a very interesting conversation because we both world build, but it's in a very different way. And it took me really making a list and figuring out, who am I? What brings me joy? Feels like I always meant to do it. It gives me energy when I think about it, right? It's research. I love researching for my books. And I also love organizing the mystery, right? Making the plan, figuring out, okay, this is where I want it to end. How am I going to get there, right? And laying out all of the plot points. And you can tell just when I talk about it, it gives me energy. I get so excited talking about it. So that's why I write historical mystery, right? I am also writing some historical fiction and cozy mysteries because there are essences of all of those, right? That it all comes together, right? And then the last part is that it shares something beautiful with the world, that it reaches other people and gives them hope, okay? And that is absolutely one of my goals with my murder mysteries. And so you might ask, well, how does a murder mystery bring you hope? To me, it's the characters. I write very character-driven novels. Anyone who's read my books will be the first to tell you that. So if you don't like character-driven novels, if you're all about the plot and the action, you're not going to like my books. But if you love characters and really getting to know them and meeting people through a book that you're like, ooh, I want to have coffee with that person, right? I want to have a cup of tea with that person, then you're going to love my books, including my new historical fiction that's coming out later this month, Anna Katharine Green. So Anna Katharine Green is another one who she's a mother and an author, right? And I say she's as though she's still alive. No, she's not. She lived in the 1870s and she died in the 1930s. But what's amazing about her is she managed to publish 36 books in her lifetime while raising 3 children. So I'm going to do a whole video later this month before publication about all the connections between me and Anna Katharine Green. But one of the big ones that really encouraged me was I had just finished Butcher Baker Candlestick Taker. And then I started writing the first draft of the book that is now coming out this May. So yeah, that was 4 years ago. It was 2019, which is amazing how much it's changed since then. But what really got me going on it was discovering this woman and her first book, The Leavenworth Case, and then realizing that she got married later in life, and then she became a mom. And she was the Agatha Christie of her day. Speaking of another mother. In fact, if you really stop and look, you'll find lots of authors who are also parents. And it's really interesting how often that happens. And I think what it comes down to is we enjoy building worlds. And what we're really doing is building worlds for our kids, right? We are building stories that even if they can't read them right now, I am writing them for them to read in the future. I am so excited about someday my children reading my books, especially the one that I just finished. So another book that I highly recommend as a parent pursuing publication would be Adorning the Dark. Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson. This is another one. It was gifted to me by my mother-in-law, and she was just like, you're gonna love this. And it's another one where I don't like writing in my books, but there are some books where I'm like, nope, I'm gonna write all over this thing because this is so important to me and I want it to stick in my mind, right? And so Your Blue Flame is one of those that I actually have writing all in it. Subversive is another one. Oh, there we go. Subversive is another one that's about Dorothy L. Sayers. It's another fantastic one. And Bandersnatch right there next to it, which is about the Inklings, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and how to create a critique group. So those are other great books that I highly recommend. But specifically for parents who are like, is it okay if I write? Adorning the Dark is another incredible one. I went through a period on Instagram where I was just sharing quotes from it as I was reading it because every single chapter had something that I was like, okay, yep, I get it, God, I get it. I hear you. I hear you speaking to me. Yes. And the beautiful thing about Andrew Peterson's work is he not only writes songs, he also writes books. He writes children's books and as well as his nonfiction books. And so he has a lot of thoughts to basically just the creator. So you could read this book and be really touched no matter what you are creating, even if you're not a songwriter, right? He has a lot of stories about songwriting, and I don't write songs, but they still hit me on a level with being a story writer because there is something similar but different there, right? So this is another one that I highly recommend. It's very encouraging, and he says things that hit you so deeply and that remind you that pursuing your own dreams, everything within moderation, including moderation, right? And that includes writing, right? There are periods where I get really sucked into writing my books. And I have to plan my homeschooling around that. If I really get going on a book, I'm like, okay, this week is going to be a reading week. And that's when I let them read books a lot that week and still doing their math and other things. But it's a lot more independent learning that week because I'm like, nope, I need the time to finish my book, right? And what inevitably ends up happening is they start writing their own book. They'll be reading something and be inspired. And then they'll be like, well, Mom, is it okay if I go write a book instead of reading the book? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, please. And it's so much fun listening to their stories. I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to take a minute to briefly talk about being an author and a mom at the same time. And it just seemed like the perfect weekend to take a minute and do that. I want to just say to all the parents out there that you can do it. You can find the time to write. And I know it feels like finding the time. Some of the logistic questions might come up. When do you find time to write? And again, it comes down to what works for you. My husband wakes up at 5 a.m. every morning and writes for a couple hours because that's when his brain gets going and it's when the kids are still asleep. And so he's able to write. And I write at night. I cannot wake up that early. I am definitely a night person. And so the struggle that I often find, though, is that by the end of the day, sometimes I'm just exhausted and I don't have the energy to write. So again, it's finding what works for you. And sometimes it depends on the season that we're going through. And by season, I don't necessarily mean fall, winter, spring, summer. I mean, I think we all go through seasons of life, right? There was a season where we were raising young kids, infants, right? And neither of us wrote. We were just pursuing our daily life and trying to get up every morning and make sure everybody's fed by the end of the day, right? I mean, it's just getting through the day, right? And it took until the kids were older that I was able to focus on myself and realize that I was getting drained. I was getting drained every day. And I needed something to bring me that energy again. And that's where that whole discovering your blue flame. If you find your blue flame, it gives me energy. If I can get energized throughout the day thinking about my book, then by the end, at night, I am ready to go and I'll write until 1 a.m. It's just a question of finding that energy and getting excited about something, getting excited about a project. And honestly, in the end, if you are excited about your project, if you are excited about your writing, other people are going to be excited about it too, because that excitement leaks in through the page. I think you can tell when an author, if I pick up a book, I can tell if the author really cared about what they were writing or not, because it comes through, and that excitement makes readers excited. So from one parent to another, I just encourage you to find your blue flame. Find that thing that brings you joy, that gives you energy, that you were meant to do, that will bring hope and love to others. I encourage you to find that thing and let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear what some of your blue flames are. What is it that just fills you with joy? It doesn't have to be writing. It can be anything. Homeschooling is another blue flame of mine because it answers that. That's what I'm realizing is the research and planning part of me. That's what my blue flame actually is. And so pouring it into my writing, pouring it into my homeschooling. That's what brings me joy. I would love to hear what brings you joy. It could be just having a bit of tea with an author. I hope that this has brought you some happiness for your weekend, and I hope you have a truly blessed and wonderful Mother's Day weekend. Thank you for joining me, and I hope I'll see you next week. Thanks.